In that very instant, the general's ears caught the high priest's booming question, demanding to know what was obstructing their path. He recognized it at once, the high priest's voice transmission spell. The adventurers, too, heard the disembodied voice echoing around them. A wave of confusion washed over them. They were desperate to understand the words, but the strange tongue was utterly incomprehensible. It was the guttural language of the monsters. Yet, the protagonist found it deeply unsettling, for he understood every single word perfectly. The priest's voice thundered, making it unequivocally clear to his horde that Lord Julian Shi was eagerly anticipating the promised sacrifices. He commanded them to surge forward, to make the enemy choke on the bitter taste of fear. Intrigued, the protagonist reached out telepathically. He questioned Julian Shi directly in his mind, asking if this monstrous legion truly belonged to him. The Malevolent God's answer was a stark denial. "Do not mistake them for your own," the entity warned, before his voice erupted in a furious shout directed at the high priest. "You fools on the battlefield are only hastening my demise," he roared. "I command you all to halt this instant." Hearing this, the high priest froze, utterly shell-shocked. He stammered that a direct response had come from their powerful, malevolent god. With newfound urgency, he relayed the message to his warriors, proclaiming that they must obey their god's divine revelation without question. The monstrous creatures murmured amongst themselves, acknowledging the command, though confusion rippled through their ranks. But the message grew terrifyingly clear, as Julian Shi's voice thundered again. "Do not advance another step, or you will all be utterly annihilated." The entire army came to a dead halt, paralyzed by the ultimatum. One of the creatures turned to its leader. It asked the high priest in a trembling voice if Lord Julian Shi had truly forsaken them. The priest was at a complete loss for words. He could only wonder what they were supposed to do now. A nearby orc warrior, gripped by terror, demanded to know why the high priest was even hesitating. "You are the one who is supposed to lead us," the orc bellowed. The priest, meanwhile, debated if they should attempt to close the secret realm first. The warrior's terror turned to rage, accusing the priest, "This is all your fault for opening the secret realm prematurely. Now its energy is almost completely drained," he snarled, making it impossible to seal the gateway. At that moment, a notification illuminated Liam Feng's vision, a system message confirming their successful defense against the demonic tide. As the system finalizes the calculation of their rewards, the adventurers look on in absolute astonishment. They marvel at gaining enough experience to ascend a staggering 4 levels in a single campaign. Not only that, but they acquired a high-grade attribute gem. Yet Kale is blindsided by a completely unexpected hidden reward. The sacred reinforced key, an artifact of unknown power, materializes before him, prompting Hayden to immediately demand what he is holding. Kale turned to his loyal ice demon, asking if even it recognized such a peculiar item. The demon respectfully apologized to its master, confessing it had never seen such a key, speculating from its name alone. It could be an object intended for the gods themselves, a thought that makes Kale pause and consider the implications. He concludes it's best to set it aside for now, knowing his true priority is to complete his next task. His third transformation quest takes precedence. Sometime later, Kale journeys to the secret domain of the Whispering Jungle. After stepping through the portal, he finds a high priest inside who remarks that they seem to face only one enemy. A glimmer of hope appears. The priest strategizes that while their foe is distracted, they may have a chance. He plans to use magic to create a disruption, making it clear to his warrior companion that he must seize the opportunity. With one perfectly timed arrow, they could eliminate the threat. Yet the priest's mind remains mired in confusion. He is still desperately trying to comprehend why Lord Jackson would have abandoned them on the battlefield. Had they done something to displease him? He knew that by making contact with the altar, he might find answers. Through it, he could still perceive the divine whispers of the gods, and he felt a desperate urge to listen again. He hoped to receive any form of guidance from Lord Jackson, no matter how grim the message might be. Any word at all would suffice. At that precise moment, a malevolent god appears and speaks directly into their minds. Simultaneously, Silas urgently warns KL that 2 entities are hiding behind the altar, preparing an ambush. Nathaniel appears silently behind them, his sudden presence striking such profound terror that the priest can only scream in madness. Leon then vanquishes his foes, claiming the Emblem of Nature, a legendary artifact that permanently grants an additional 5 points to his agility and spirit. Nina marvels at the item's extraordinary quality, but her awe is cut short by a sinister aura pulsing from a nearby altar. "It's the power of darkness," she whispers, explaining that Leon could approach the altar to absorb its energy and amplify his own strength. The malevolent god, watching from afar, secretly hopes for this, believing that if Leon absorbs the dark power, he himself might also stand to gain. However, without a moment's hesitation, Leon unleashes his full power and utterly shatters the evil god's demonic altar. The god is left stunned, never having expected such a decisive act from a mere human. He immediately demands to know why, but Nina's expression hardens as she commands him to be silent. Leon reflects internally that he doesn't grasp the fundamental principles of these demonic altars, and therefore, the safest course of action is always complete destruction. Meanwhile, in the celestial realm, the god of pure essence takes possession of one of the 7 demonic divinities, that of profaned madness. He intends to follow the methods of the goddess of the eternal dawn, hoping to fuse with it as swiftly as possible. But a strange, volatile reaction begins to consume the power core. The god struggles to contain it with all his might, but soon realizes the energy is spiraling beyond his control. The goddess calmly explains that such dark power is born from demonic sacrifices, offered to the demon god, and that its divinity will instinctively absorb this hidden energy in a frantic attempt to break its seal. For this reason, she has always known that fusing with such a divinity is an exceptionally perilous task, where losing control is almost a certainty. The god of pure essence bellows for her to be quiet, snarling that he has no time to waste on her lectures. He thinks furiously that no matter the difficulty, if the omnipotent mage could achieve it, then so can he. Back at the Class Advancement Center, the system's voice chimes, informing Leon that his rank S mission has been completed to 100%, and that his very understanding of the cosmos has been profoundly enhanced. Feng was momentarily perplexed, wondering if a grand transformation was supposed to be happening, as he felt no discernible change. However, a new system notification materialized, informing him that he could now temporarily manifest a passage to other realms. This passage, originating from the secret domain of his believers, would be opened and sustained by consuming a specific resource. It would feed on the dark power generated by the sacrifices of his faithful. Feng was intrigued. The power to breach the walls between worlds was now his. He immediately resolved to visit the Orc realm, and by channeling his power, he effortlessly tore open a swirling, ethereal portal. Hargun, watching his master, felt a profound sense of awe, thinking that he was truly worthy of being hailed as a dark god. To casually manipulate the very fabric of space and time was a display of absolute power. The protagonist understood the monumental significance of this new ability. He realized that just as other gods could invade his world, the tables had turned. He could now enter the domains they controlled. Standing before the shimmering gateway, he contemplated what kind of world lay in wait for him on the other side. As he pondered whether to take the leap, the orc leader respectfully asked if his master required his accompaniment. Feng responded that it was unnecessary, explaining that he was merely conducting a preliminary reconnaissance. He emphasized, however, that the portal's anchor was within the orc realm, and he needed Hargun to protect it from any outside interference. Feng also made it unequivocally clear that, should the orc leader encounter an insurmountable foe, he would appear in an instant to intervene. Hargun confidently assured his master not to worry. He vowed to fulfill his duty flawlessly. With that crucial task delegated, the protagonist finally stepped through the portal's veil. The moment he crossed over, he was astonished by the new realm. Its scenery was a world apart from the familiar landscapes of Blue Star. Yet, before indulging his curiosity, he snapped his fingers, prioritizing the activation of a particular item. He called upon the Enchanting Illusion skill book, a tool that made it impossible for normal eyes to distinguish reality from fabrication, allowing him to manipulate their perceptions at his command. After mastering the skill, the protagonist recalled that this potent ability was yet another reward he had earned in the previous realm, and realizing its immense potential, he decides to find a high vantage point with a wide vista to determine his path. Upon reaching a peak, he sees a massive city stretched out before him, and as he enters, he begins to walk among its people, noticing they all seem incredibly ancient, a detail revealed only by his unique ability. Fortunately, this same power renders him invisible to their senses, and he finds he can effortlessly understand their speech. He quietly wonders if this newfound clarity stems from his deeper understanding of the universe. Fenrir then urgently directs his master's attention ahead, pointing toward a grand temple, home to the devoted followers of the goddess known as the Eternal Morning Star. Kalen asks if this is the same deity who favors the support classes. Fenrir confirms it, praising his master's sharp memory. However, Kalen feels that despite his curiosity about the sanctuary, it would be wiser to stay away and avoid drawing any unwanted attention. He instead guides them toward a plaza where a large crowd has congregated, their focus on a man raising a magnificent staff. Fenrir quickly asks his master to decipher the crowd's excited chatter. Kalen listens for a moment before commenting, "It seems those individuals have returned from a secret realm, bringing with them an exceptionally rare item." He also notes the formidable aura emanating from the group, a power that stirs palpable envy in everyone surrounding them. Fenrir, his gaze fixed on the man holding the staff, tells his master that if he is not mistaken, the artifact bears a striking resemblance to one he himself once used. Kalen is puzzled by the ice demon's statement. Fenrir explains that the design style is incredibly distinct, something that only another member of the divine lineage could ever conceive of creating. He then speaks a name from the past, Xylia, the Song of Death. Kalen spots two figures discussing the event and decides to approach them, politely asking for a moment of their time. He inquires about the origin of the impressive item the mage is holding. One of the men scoffs, saying that the item is the most coveted hidden reward from that secret realm, the staff of the Malevolent God. It is also known, the man adds with a cruel smile, as Xylia's shame. Kalen is taken aback, asking, "Is that truly its name?" The creature's words sent a chill down his spine, confirming their worst fears. She was the final master of this domain. It elaborated on the dark legend, whispering how Xylia was once a servant to a malevolent god before the Lord of Light himself subdued her, imprisoning her within this very realm. A wave of concern washed over Hayden. He turned to Noah, his voice low. "I fear it truly is Xylia. Should we even attempt to save her?" Noah Feng remained contemplative, the gears of his mind turning. "The decision is complex," he mused aloud. "But I also require the staff of the Malevolent God." He pressed for a way to acquire it. The creature sneered, pointing a bony finger at Noah. "You must be new here, aren't you, rookie? There's only a single path into the hidden domain," it hissed, "and our price for passage is a steep 1,000 billion. Noah's mind raced, questioning if balance were the standard currency of this strange and twisted world. An impossible sum. But with a subtle smirk, he reached for a pouch, channeling his formidable power of Enchanting Illusion. He was confident his skill would be more than enough to deceive them. The chances of being discovered were practically non-existent. With a steady hand, he presented the pouch to the guides. Their eyes widened in disbelief, for inside glittered 1,000 billion balance. One of the guides grunted in approval. "You're a man of your word." He then spun on his heel, beckoning Noah to follow them into the depths. Deeper within the phantom domain, the secret realm of the Enchantress, one of the guides turned to issue a stark warning to Noah. "The paths here are a treacherous maze," the guide cautioned, his voice echoing in the eerie silence. "It's disarmingly easy to lose your way on your first visit. And should you stray and require rescue, the price will be substantially higher." A sinister laugh escaped the other guide, who secretly planned to abandon Noah and profit from his rescue. Just as they were relishing their wicked scheme, the first guide paused, realizing the silence behind them was unnatural. Noah's footsteps were gone. He turned, half expecting to find his partner muttering to himself, but instead, they were met with an empty path. Noah Feng had vanished. To their horror, the pouch filled with their payment had disappeared along with him. Far ahead, Noah was already moving like a phantom through the labyrinth. Hayden's voice echoed in his master's mind, confirming his senses. "I am certain of it. This is undoubtedly the territory of Xylia. It was once known as the Sunken King's Dungeons," he explained, "but time and fear have given it a new name. Its name to the phantom domain of the Enchantress, as they chart the unfamiliar territory." Halen confidently states his intimate knowledge of every path, insisting there is no chance of him being mistaken. He asserts that unless the secret realm has been warped or altered, Xylia must be exceptionally close. After pausing within a vast hall, Halen immediately recognizes the space as Cecilia's personal library, and reveals that she spends most of her time within its walls. At that very moment, she appears, unleashing a terrifying aura. Halen begins to tremble at the sight of her, as Cecilia, without hesitation, unleashes her formidable power. She launches a brutal assault on the Praetor and the Ice Demon, prompting Halen to shout, questioning how Cecilia dares to disrespect the Praetor. Lost to madness, she screams, branding them as blue-skinned fiends. She declares with fury that they will never humiliate her again, adding that if it weren't for the seal, she would turn their very existence into a living nightmare. The Ice Demon notes that he regained his clarity upon seeing the Praetor, and wonders why Cecilia didn't experience the same, but he grows alarmed by a sudden, chilling thought. He recalls her exact words, blue-skinned fiends. He immediately turns to his master, and theorizes that this might be linked to the illusionary ability he is projecting. Grasping the situation, the Praetor deactivates his power. Cecilia's expression shifts instantly to one of utter disbelief and surprise, as she whispers that she can't believe she is truly seeing the evil god. The Praetor is consumed by frustration, realizing the entire violent ordeal was triggered simply because his ability was active, as she cries out, asking the Praetor if it is truly him. the evil god. Halon also steps in, confirming his presence however. Cecilia's rage flares once more. She loses control again and unleashes her terrifying power, screaming at the ice demon, calling him a blue-skinned fiend yet again. The praetor urgently asks his friend what is happening, and demands to know why Cecilia's delusion hasn't been dispelled, all while skillfully dodging her relentless assaults. The ice demon replies that everything is proceeding as it should, explaining that the praetor likely doesn't remember, but the insult blue-skinned fiend, that name. It was a whisper from Cecita, a name she had given him in a moment of clarity, right after the madness receded, her first question being what had befallen him. Hanyun observes with a heavy heart, noting that for reasons unknown, his master's past seems to have been wiped clean, leaving an unsettling void where memories should be. Cecita speculates aloud, her voice laced with disdain, wondering if the blame lies with those duplicitous gods. The ice demon then reveals to Cecita that she was still drawing breath at the moment of his own demise. He suggests that her knowledge could be the key to aiding the protagonist. In a sudden, solemn gesture, she drops to her knees, pledging her unwavering loyalty and pleading to return to the sanctuary of his protection. However, she explains that her will is not her own. She is a prisoner, bound to this very spot by a powerful seal cast by the goddess known as the Eternal Morning Star. This divine prison renders her unable to leave. Her composure shatters as she screams in fury, accusing the goddess of maliciously shackling her true power. The goddess's cruelty twisted her, morphing her into a monstrous entity trapped within this hidden realm. She confesses the true horror of her fate, an endless cycle of being slain, only to be reborn countless times. This perpetual torment has shattered her, both physically and mentally. With what little hope she has left, she implores the protagonist to be her savior, to finally release her from this unending agony. Ning Feng interjects with a note of caution, pointing out that her circumstances are vastly different from Hanyun's, and he is uncertain if the method that saved one can be replicated for another. The ice demon, however, offers unwavering support, assuring his master to cast aside any worry, affirming that whatever path he chooses will be law. He declares that everyone present will honor that choice. Hanyun then turns to Cecita, his tone grave, making the grim reality of the plan crystal clear. He explains that for any hope of salvation to exist, the protagonist must first end her life. Only through death can the attempt to truly save her begin. He reveals that this paradoxical path is the very one that brought him back from the brink, but he cannot guarantee the same miracle will work for her. Without a moment's hesitation, she accepts her fate, declaring her absolute faith and placing her life and soul completely in the hands of the demon lord. A shadow of seriousness falls over the protagonist's face as he realizes this realm is not neutral ground. It is tainted by the influence of other divine beings. Lingering here is a risk they cannot afford. With this grim realization, his sword is drawn, his mind set on a single thought. They must act with haste. To escape this cursed place, there can be no delay. With a heavy heart and a swift strike, he grants Cecita her final, necessary end. The moment she falls, an ancient seal flares to life, trapping them within its light. Elsewhere, this disturbance does not go unnoticed as city guards begin to teleport instantly. Their destination is the temple, tasked with uncovering the source of the commotion. A commander's voice rings out, announcing that the secret realm's seal has been breached, and ordering an immediate response. All guards are commanded to converge on the temple and investigate. From within the hallowed halls, a furious shout echoes, vowing that whoever is responsible will face their wrath. They are to be apprehended and brought before the goddess for judgment. As the activated seal rapidly expands, consuming the entire realm, a wave of terror washes over Cecita, who cries out that the formation has been catastrophically triggered. She desperately pleads with Liu Yifei to escape at once, urging him not to concern himself with her fate. Liu Yifei comes to a grim realization. No items dropped upon her elimination, a clear sign that his attempt to save her had failed. In mere moments, a phalanx of guards begins its inexorable advance toward Liu Yifei. A commanding general bellows that he is now ensnared by the goddess's seal, sending Cecita deeper into despair as she apologizes to her master. She blames herself for trapping him, only to be stunned into silence as her master begins to unleash a truly terrifying power. Liu Yifei remarks grimly that he has one final resort, though he is uncertain of its success, adding that, should it fail, the entire secret realm could be erased from existence. She screams, begging him to reconsider his course of action. Ignoring her cries, Liu Yifei unleashes his corrosive wind ability, conjuring a violent tempest infused with abyssal power. This maelstrom possesses the strength to corrupt all light, and every creature in its path is immediately engulfed by its suffocating influence. Within seconds, they are utterly obliterated. In the ensuing chaos, the mage who clutched Sasita's item, loses his grip. The artifact that falls is of legendary quality, capable of being upgraded and imbued with spells like Soul Withering and Phantom Domain Harvest. Moreover, Sasita's soul, having absorbed the city's divine energy, did not dissipate as expected. Instead, her very essence has become bound to the item, granting its wielder a bonus of 12 points to their spirit attribute, 12 points in magical damage, and a 15% increase to their spell-casting range. Without wasting a moment, Liu Yifei seizes the artifact. He calls out Sasita's name, confirming with relief that his desperate gambit was a success. Meanwhile, far away in the Orc Kingdom, Hargan maintains his vigilant watch, just as his master had requested. Suddenly, the air before him tears open, revealing the shimmering rift of a portal. From the vortex, Liu Yifei emerges. The Orc leader's stern expression breaks into one of genuine relief upon seeing his master return. Liu Yifei informs him that his guard duty is over, revealing his decision to permanently seal the passage behind him, and that Hargan is now free to forge his own path. Aiden Thorne understood the immense strain. Maintaining the portal was draining the last vestiges of dark energy, a power gleaned from grim sacrifices. With their power nearly exhausted, Aiden remarked to the Ice Demon, a note of regret in his voice, that it was a profound shame that artifacts from higher realms were forbidden in lower ones. If not for this cosmic law, he could have returned armed with truly legendary equipment. Haniel chuckled, confirming that even divine artifacts must bow to such fundamental rules, but noted that on the brighter side, everything had proceeded perfectly, for Aseda had at last returned. With that, Aiden raised the formidable staff he had acquired from the upper realm. Instantly, the system interface flared to life, revealing the weapon's staggering details. It was the Staff of Lord Requiem, a legendary and upgradable artifact that, when equipped, bestowed upon its wielder 1,500 points to their spiritual attribute. It amplified magic damage by 150%, increased casting range by 150%, and extended spell duration by a staggering 130%. Moreover, it was a timeless piece, immune to the wear of battle. Its standard attacks were imbued with the essence of death, carrying a 20% chance to inflict a debilitating weakening curse upon its targets. Furthermore, in the presence of death's energy, the wielder's own mana would steadily regenerate. The staff held even greater power, capable of unleashing effects like the Withered Soul, establishing a Reaper's domain, and spreading a creeping corruption. It could even project a devastating death ray. Most importantly, the soul of Seraphina, blessed by divine grace, had not faded into oblivion, but was now intrinsically bound to this very staff. As Aiden inspected his new weapon, he remembered his unique runic knowledge, which allowed him to transform a mundane artifact into one with limitless potential for growth. However, to fully restore Seraphina's life, he would need to find and embed a new fragment of the world heart within the staff. A chilling realization dawned upon him. Such fragments were typically found only in higher-level worlds, meaning his future would be filled with perilous journeys into advanced realms, much like the one they had just survived, all in the desperate search for these elusive fragments. Meanwhile, far away in the hallowed temple of the Eternal Morning Star, the goddess's acolytes communed with their divine mistress. Her voice echoed through a shimmering dimensional rift, first in a celestial, unknown tongue, before shifting to the familiar language of her devoted followers. She demanded to know what had transpired, her tone commanding obedience, and one of her servants, utterly terrified, began to tremble uncontrollably. Desperately begs the goddess to forgive their carelessness, reporting that an unidentified intruder had violated the sacred realm she had personally sealed. The goddess notes that she sensed a dark force of such overwhelming power that it shattered her own seal, demanding to know if this was a demonic invasion. The servant apologizes profusely once more, confessing that the intruder's identity remains completely unknown. The Eternal Morning Star's patience shatters, her voice laced with fury. She calls them fools and questions whether a recording formation existed within the secret realm and why they failed to dispatch an investigative team immediately. Trembling uncontrollably, the terrified servant delivers the final, devastating news. The secret realm itself had vanished. Meanwhile, at the training facility, Leo Vance arrives at a secluded location, the capybara demon nestled in his arms. He surveys the room before him, remarking on its fine construction and the surprising vastness of its interior space. He then draws forth the mysterious key he obtained, and the system interface promptly queries if he wishes to rebuild the secret realm of the Requiem of Souls. Leo remembers that this artifact, the Sacred Key of Reconstruction, was acquired during the last demonic tide for this very purpose, to restore destroyed secret realms at any chosen location. He confirms the action, Though a troubling thought arises, had saving Celeste drawn the unwanted attention of another god? He muses that if there were a strategy to eliminate them one by one, that would be the most favorable path forward. In the celestial domain of the vast starry sky, the divine realm governed by the eternal goddess of the morning star, she remains deeply perplexed, striving to comprehend the recent events where a potent dark energy obliterated a seal she had personally woven. She contemplates the horrifying possibility that a demon god has been resurrected, recalling that it has been an eternity since she last experienced such a chilling premonition. The last time, she remembers with a shudder, was during the war against the omniscient God. A cold fear grips her as she considers the implications, and a more terrifying thought takes root. Could it truly be the one person she dares not name? After a long, unnerving silence, she summons the Requiem God of Souls to voice her grave concerns. Requiem's voice cut through the tension, questioning if her fears about the Omnipotent One's return were truly genuine. She confessed her uncertainty, to which Requiem scoffed, remarking that the Omnipotent God had vanished for an eternity. His very existence was now a matter of debate. He pointedly observed the telltale sign of her distress, the uncontrollable way the eternal morning star gnawed at her hand when consumed by anxiety. It was a clear scar from the ancient war, a conflict that had evidently left her profoundly and deeply shaken. He then dismissed the fearsome entity as nothing more than a cornered animal, a fugitive who had done little but cower in the shadows for ages. So, what power could he possibly wield now? What difference could his return possibly make, with his followers either turned to dust or scattered to the winds? Requiem pressed his point, reminding her of her own words. The one who shattered the seal had employed a forbidden dark incantation. Surely, she knew that merely invoking a malevolent name did not have the power to transform the caster into the entity itself. His logic found its mark. The goddess's tense posture softened as she conceded that perhaps her reaction had been born of paranoia. With a wave of his hand, Requiem proposed they investigate the matter first, dismissing the issue as merely a wretched temple and a secret realm. It was nothing worth her divine anguish. Shifting the subject, the eternal morning star inquired about the God of the Holy Spirit's true essence. Requiem informed her that he remained in seclusion, explaining that the intricate process of divine fusion was no simple matter to master. Meanwhile, within the hidden realm of the city of the dead, Hanyun gazed in awe, declaring the sight before him a true divine miracle. He imagined aloud that when Sacita was finally resurrected, she would be overwhelmed with joy to find her world so perfectly preserved. Every tome lining the library's shelves, he explained, was part of Sacita's personal collection, gathered painstakingly over countless years. To her, these books were treasures more precious than life itself. A warm smile graced Ningfang's face as he turned to the ice demon. He made a solemn vow to one day restore Hanyun's own world as well, a promise so profound it brought the loyal demon to tears. Overcome with emotion, Hanyun thanked his master for such a monumental kindness, admitting how deeply he yearned for his lost home. Ningfang watched, feeling a deep empathy for Hanyun's longing. He knew that restoring a world required more than just the world's heart fragment. A reconstruction key was also essential. In that moment, he realized this journey was invaluable, and not solely because of what it meant for Sacita. He elaborates to Hanyun that it wasn't just victory, but a massive level boost he received after conquering the secret realm. He had instantly leaped from level 90 to 120, and was now on the verge of his fourth transformation. The ice demon interjects, explaining that in higher-tier worlds, the experience rewards are astronomically greater. This makes for an incredibly efficient leveling method. Yet Ningfang recognizes that causing such a significant disturbance will likely draw the gaze of other deities who could make him their specific target. For that reason, he must remain ever vigilant, even when ascending in power. He then summons the ice demon. Their purpose is to visit the job change hall and accept a new set of challenges. Upon arrival, a particular quest stands out. The Omnipotent Mage God's fourth-class change quest. It came with several stringent requirements. The first being to enter the secret realm of the mind-spirit labyrinth and secure the coveted mental emblem. The second task was to gather 100 transformation stones, the third, 150 evil crystals, and finally, he needed to collect 150 clear heart vines. The mission had a 20-day deadline and a daunting S-rank difficulty. Ningfang notes that the secret realm of the mind-spirit labyrinth appears to be an entirely unique domain. Recalling the last creature's horrifying screams and relentless pleading gives him a moment of pause, but he hardens his resolve as he steps toward the portal. He finds solace in the fact that, thankfully, this time the ultimate prey is not him, but rather the hidden master lurking deep within the secret realm. Upon materializing inside the labyrinth of the mind, Ning Feng is startled to find a creature waiting directly in his path. It exuded a fearsome aura and offered a chilling smile, which then twisted into a series of utterly strange facial expressions. Ning Feng is bewildered, questioning whether this peculiar performance was seriously intended to be a worthy challenge for him. Only moments earlier, as Ning Feng breached the realm, several lesser creatures had scurried in a panic to their master. They warned that the solitary mage was on the attack once more. The creature was thrown into a frenzy, declaring there was no hope of defeating Ning Feng. A wave of uncertainty washes over him, but a voice from deep within his consciousness cuts through the doubt, questioning why he fears what he already possesses. The voice affirms his suspicions, revealing with chilling certainty that his enemies have summoned a being of far greater power. The summoned entity reveals its ultimate technique, a devastating assault it calls massive intelligence reduction. It boasts that regardless of an opponent's mental fortitude, a single successful strike will trigger an unstoppable, continuous decline. It then issues a clear directive to the secret realm's master: keep the mage occupied, and it will deliver the decisive, unseen blow. The goal is to ensure Leo cannot evade the attack, for once his mental attributes begin to crumble, his fate will be sealed. With a sinister promise to torment him properly, the creature lies in wait. Back in the heat of the moment, the plan unfolds. As the realm boss desperately tries to distract Leo with absurd antics, the summoned entity silently unleashes its mind-shattering ability. The attack lands, and the realm boss erupts in celebration, believing their strategy has succeeded perfectly. However, their triumph is short-lived. Leo Vance effortlessly neutralizes the effect, a cold realization dawning on him about a skill he had only recently acquired. He understood now that this new power could repel psychic assaults, an ability he had originally intended to save for a much greater foe. He had prepared it for a confrontation with the God of the Holy Spirit's true essence, but this ability did more than just block mental attacks. It reflected them back at the caster with amplified force. As a consequence, the summoned creature is savagely struck by its own devastating spell. Overwhelmed and dazed by its reflected power, the creature falters. Leo's expression turns grave, and a creeping dread descends upon the realm boss. He panics, realizing that even without this hidden entity, Leo had always been an intimidating presence. Now, with his trump card on the field, nothing had changed. He is still utterly terrified. Despair takes hold as he weeps, wondering if he summoned this powerful being for absolutely no reason at all. Leo Vance wastes no further time. With cold, merciless efficiency, he eliminates the master of the secret realm. From his victory, he claims the mental emblem. Upon consuming it, he permanently gains an additional 20 points to his mental attribute. Leo Vance reflects that as his core attributes steadily climb, the patterns for obtaining these powerful emblems are becoming much clearer. He now understands that the path forward requires him to seek out and defeat hidden bosses of extraordinary strength. To secure a rare drop, fully aware of the monumental challenge that lay ahead, he felt a flicker of relief. At last, the burden wouldn't rest solely on his shoulders, allowing things to finally start moving in the right direction. With a determined glint in his eye, he reached for his phone, deciding he would check with the exchange center. He needed to know if they had gathered enough conversion stones, but the voice on the other end of the line was hesitant. The manager awkwardly apologized, explaining that the supply of conversion stones remained critically insufficient. They assured him they were working tirelessly to prepare them, a fact Aiden Crest understood all too well, as conversion stones were a notoriously high-demand resource. He had only just acquired a batch for his own third-class evolution, making him acutely aware of their current scarcity. However, with a considerable amount of time still remaining before his mission deadline, panic was an indulgence he simply couldn't afford. There was no need to rush. For the moment, his path was clear: return to the training field immediately. Upon arrival, he was met with an unexpected sight: a large gathering of adventurers. A wave of curiosity washed over him as he wondered why the field was suddenly buzzing with such vibrant energy. The moment they noticed the protagonist's presence, a thunderous cheer erupted from the crowd. "Boss Aiden Crest is back!" they shouted with fervor. He recognized their faces instantly. They were the elite unit from the battle against the demonic tide. A sense of camaraderie filled him as he approached, asking directly, "Leo Vance, what's going on here?" Leo Vance explained that the authorities had just made the decision to extend the training camp's duration, a necessary move considering all the recent changes. He continued, stating that everything they knew was now new territory, and rather than squandering precious resources, it was far more effective to focus on properly training a core group of individuals. As he finished, the other adventurers eagerly gathered around their protagonist. They commented on how this would give them the opportunity to see him more often, asking him to guide them properly. The protagonist let out a warm laugh, replying, "You're asking me? The group standing around me is already the strongest in the entire country. One of the adventurers questioned his statement, confused, since everyone knew that he alone was the strongest warrior in the nation. At that precise moment, a figure appeared in a sudden flash, prompting the adventurers to wonder aloud if it was Clara Thorne. They questioned why she was in such a rush, but before they could speculate further, she reached the protagonist and delivered the grave news. Something has happened. Nathan Feng's voice cut through the line, sharp with urgency. What is it? Her reply was grim. The auction house had just reported that the transformation stones prepared for him had been stolen. He was incredulous, finding it hard to believe someone would have the audacity to raid the auction house. He pressed her for information, demanding to know if they had any leads. The scene rewinds to a few moments prior, within the secure walls of the Summit Crest auction house, where Director Cheng announced their success. We have finally secured 100 transformation stones. They must be transported to the training camp immediately. Use the utmost haste, he stressed, and deliver them personally into Nathan Feng's hands. The head of security affirmed the order with a curt nod. I will see to it at once, he promised. As the director clicked the suitcase shut, a malevolent aura began to seep from its seams, coalescing in the air. From this ominous mist, a shadowy appendage lunged out, seizing the director by the throat. The guard rushed to his aid, only to be ensnared by a second spectral form. He was immediately overwhelmed, ambushed by several more phantoms that materialized out of nowhere, leaving him no room to defend himself. Powerless against the onslaught, he was struck down, collapsing face first onto the polished floor. The primary shadow then drifted ominously toward the captive auction house director. Its grip tightened on his throat once more. The director, now gripped by terror, gasped, "What manner of creature are you?" At that very instant, a new figure emerged from the shadows, his voice dripping with amusement. I heard a rumor that Summit Crest's auction house had been stockpiling transformation stones. It appears those rumors were true. The director's expression hardened with dreadful recognition. Staring at the young man, he breathed his name, Julian Shang, the eldest son of the rival Wei auction house. The director knew that Julian Shang and Caden Chen had been classmates, competing in the same year's supernova trials. However, Julian's future had been derailed. He was infamously disqualified from the university entrance examinations for intentionally crippling an opponent. Rumor had it he moved abroad in a storm of fury, never to return. Until now. As this realization dawned, the young man's shadow began to crush the director's windpipe, but Julian raised a hand. Not yet, he said, a cold curiosity in his eyes. I still have questions for him. He leaned in, his voice low and threatening. Tell me why Summit Crest Auction House is so desperately collecting transformation stones, and what, he continued, is your ultimate purpose for them? The director, struggling for breath, cried out for the young man not to take a step he couldn't take back. He then explains they are for a highly important client, a detail that piques Jasper Zhang's interest. Placing a hand on the suitcase filled with precious stones, Jasper smirks, remarking how incredibly convenient that is. He continues, explaining that the Weijian auction house would also cherish such a valuable client. Jasper then makes his intentions crystal clear. He is taking the stones. He instructs the director that if this so-called important client appears, they should be directed to find him at the Weijian auction house. With that final declaration, he vanishes into thin air. The shadow creature releases its hold, and the director collapses to his knees. Gasping and coughing violently, he tries to scream, to beg the young man to stop. Later, after Cynthia Tsai recounts the entire ordeal to the protagonist, Nathan silently reflects on what he's heard. The Weijian auction house, he muses, is a major player in the trading world. It rivals the Cheng Yuan trading house in sheer scale, leading him to wonder if this is merely a brutal case of corporate rivalry. Cynthia explains that, initially, this conflict shouldn't have concerned them at all. However, when they dispatched representatives to negotiate, Jasper Zhang responded with overwhelming force, driving them away. She adds a chilling detail. Jasper has grown significantly more powerful than before, and the creature he summoned is formidable. It's stronger, she warns, than most boss-level entities found within the secret realms. Just then, Nathan's phone chimes. He asks the adventurer for a moment's patience while he takes the call. Cynthia nods, assuring him she can wait. On the other end, Nathan asks what Dante wants. Dante replies that Mayor Kai has just reported a critical incident. Nathan immediately asks if it concerns the transformation stones, explaining that Cynthia Kai has just briefed him. That simplifies things, Dante replies. He continues, informing Nathan that he and the Capybara demon are already approaching the Weijian headquarters, so Nathan doesn't need to travel there himself. Nathan agrees and urges Dante to be cautious. Nearby, Hannah remarks that it seems like a straightforward matter. She believes it's hardly worth the protagonist's personal intervention, commenting on how much Dante has improved recently. Leaving the task to him would be a perfect test of his skills, especially since the formidable demon is by his side. Meanwhile, within the opulent reception room of the Wei Jian auction house, Jasper's uncle paces nervously before confronting his nephew. If he was truly certain it was a wise decision to have taken something from the Yuancheng auction house, Josh Eng let out a laugh, assuring his uncle there was no need for concern, as Yuancheng's auction house was perpetually trying to corner the market. Therefore, he had merely delivered a small but necessary lesson. His uncle, deeply troubled, thought to himself that Josh Eng had been indulged and headstrong since he was a boy, always courting disaster by relying too much on his own strength. He never anticipated that the moment his nephew returned from abroad, he would immediately begin to stir up such turmoil. He then addressed his nephew directly, explaining that his only worry was because the 7 major guilds had recently entered into a partnership with the Yuancheng auction house. Josh Eng scoffed, dismissing the 7 major guilds as nothing more than a troupe of clowns, before asking his uncle if he was aware that deities existed in their world. His uncle conceded that he had heard faint rumors to that effect, and that it seemed to be a very recent discovery. Josh Eng then announced his wish to formally introduce his master, a devout follower who had been blessed by the deities themselves. The uncle's eyes drifted to the person sitting nearby, consuming a drink in a most peculiar and unsettling manner. He wondered if this was the individual Josh Eng had brought back from overseas. Josh Eng confirmed it, stating that his master hailed from a higher-level world, one that had captured the very attention of the gods, and the deity he served could not be referred to by name, only revered, as the Requiem of Souls. The young man also explained that his master's current journey across the globe was to spread their faith and recruit more believers for the deity, and that any nation willing to worship the great Lord would receive his master's divine protection. However, he issued a chilling warning that those who refused to pledge their worship to the great Lord would be utterly erased from the tapestry of existence by his master. Josh Eng's uncle commented that even if his master came from a higher world, his tone was still incredibly arrogant. Josh Eng explained that since his uncle had not yet witnessed his master's power firsthand, it was only natural that he could not fully comprehend the reality of their situation. At that very moment, the company phone began to ring. Josh Eng slammed the speaker button so everyone could listen in, then curtly asked what was happening. The receptionist reported that a visitor was present, stating that he had come to collect the transformation stones. Joshua dismissively tells them to make the person wait. He ends the call and turns to his startled uncle, asking, "Now, where were we?" His uncle replies that they were discussing the immensity of his master's power. Joshua chuckles, explaining, "To put it simply, if the highest level an adventurer in our world can possibly reach is level 300 after their 10th class change, then my master's level is, at the very least, over 1,000. He elaborates that a chasm of that magnitude cannot be bridged by something as trivial as numbers. A sinister laugh escapes him, as he declares that soon, his master will summon the great Lord to descend and bestow his divine protection upon this world. And he, Joshua, will be the first believer in this world to be blessed by the deity's grace. His uncle exhales slowly, a sense of awe in his voice as he says that in that case, there's absolutely nothing to be concerned about. After all, even the 7 major guilds, when viewed through the eyes of this so-called Great Lord, are likely less significant than insects. At that very moment, the door is violently thrown open, crashing against the wall. Joshua instantly roars, demanding to know who dares interrupt him. It's Damien, and he states his purpose plainly. He's there to collect the transformation stones. Joshua lets out a condescending laugh. "It seems people have grown rather bold while I was abroad," he sneers. He rises to his feet, a menacing aura flooding the room, and asks Damien, "Did you not hear that you were told to wait outside?" However, a look of utter shock flashes across his face. Before he can even process what's happening, a hand clamps around his neck, lifting him effortlessly from the floor. Damien wastes no time on pleasantries, his voice a low growl as he questions the boy again, demanding to know the location of the transformation stones. A cold sweat breaks out on Joshua's skin. His mind reels in disbelief. This is impossible. He was personally trained by his master. His equipment and skills are of the highest caliber. He wonders in a panic how he couldn't even perceive his opponent's movements. Just then, Damien's attention shifts as he senses a new presence. He glances to the side, where Joshua's master now stands, unleashing a terrifying wave of power. Joshua's master chuckles, remarking, "Those were some impressive moves." He then asks Damien, "Tell me, "Are you by any chance a follower of the God of the true Holy Spirit?" Damien replies with unwavering seriousness that he is not. The master's smile widens. "The fact that you deny it," he observes, "proves that you are indeed aware of that God. It seems you've encountered some miracle that has greatly amplified your power." He declares that Liam's answer was deeply offensive, its tone utterly lacking the reverence due a divine being, a clear act of arrogant blasphemy. Jackson is overcome with worry, fearing what his master is about to unleash as the man begins to radiate a terrifying and oppressive energy. His aura floods the area, making it chillingly clear that even though their beliefs may differ, a lesson in humility is coming. He proclaims he will deliver this lesson in the name of the gods, and that his shadow guard will make Liam understand that there is always a greater power. But just then, a strange sound cuts through the air, and he whips his head around, demanding to know what is happening. He lays eyes on the demon, Man, as it calmly approaches. A cold dread seizes him as he wonders how such a creature got so close without being detected. His gaze darts around frantically, searching for his protectors. He then realizes, with a surge of pure terror, that all his shadow guards have vanished. Jackson panics, explaining that his master's shadow guards were not mere soldiers. They were all formidable, high-tier demonic beasts transformed to serve him. They were beings of immense power, and he questions what kind of monstrous creature could possibly devour them so effortlessly. Liam casually remarks that, apparently, the demon man truly enjoyed the flavor of his guards. He then asks Jackson's master if he has any more, suggesting he summon a few more for his pet. The master is utterly terrified by this horrifying request. He begins to question what kind of nightmarish place he has wandered into, and in desperation, he starts to unleash his full power. He knows he is in grave danger and must seize any chance to escape as quickly as possible. But before he can act, the demon man moves. It simply touches his hand, and all of his surging magical power dissipates into nothing. The master stares in horror, unable to believe what just happened. In the next instant, Man lunges forward and lands a tremendous punch squarely on the master's face. The force of the blow shatters his teeth. He crumbles to his knees, all arrogance gone, and immediately starts begging for forgiveness. He pleads that he is just a humble adventurer who discovered a breach inside the temple by pure chance. He claims he was exploring a secret realm when he was suddenly transported here. The explanation triggers a memory for Liam. Helen had mentioned it before. It is one of the very few loopholes that allow beings from the upper worlds to enter the lower realms directly. Liam's expression hardens as he says he heard the master was trying to summon a god. The terrified man hastily begins to explain himself. His sole ambition was to wield the heart of the world, fueling a grand ritual with the singular hope of capturing a god's unwavering attention. To be acknowledged by a divine being meant he would become their chosen agent, their hand in the mortal world. This path promised unparalleled grace, but as he spoke of his plan, Liu's expression twisted into a dark, sinister sneer. He cut straight to the chase, his voice laced with menace, demanding to know if he truly possessed a fragment of the heart of the world and ordering him to surrender it that very instant. In a different realm entirely, within the divine sanctuary of the eternal star of tomorrow, the god of the true Holy Spirit had reached a monumental milestone. He had finally completed his fusion with the divine essence. The goddess offered her congratulations, a sentiment echoed by the ever-watchful Requiem of Souls. Requiem noted that such a result was expected from a 10% fusion with divinity, a thought the god of the true Holy Spirit was contemplating himself. He could feel it deep within his being. The fusion had mended the grievous wounds that had long tormented his spiritual form. The once uncontrollable dark power that raged within him had finally been brought to heel. But then, his gaze shifted forward, with a sudden intensity that puzzled the other gods. He demanded to know if something of consequence had transpired during his absence, and the eternal star of tomorrow grew visibly nervous. The name was spoken with heavy significance, the Omnipotent Mage. Requiem of Souls then turned to the god of the true Holy Spirit, posing a pointed question about a recent event. He asked if the Omnipotent Mage had truly rescued the last remnants of his former clan, a query that left the other god bewildered, demanding that Requiem be more clear. He began to explain that a significant incident had occurred while the god of the true Holy Spirit was away in his deep seclusion. The goddess interjected, her voice filled with disbelief, reminding them that the omnipotent mage she knew was a being who always avoided conflict. A chilling possibility then entered her mind, and she turned to the god of the true Holy Spirit, her voice trembling slightly. Had the man they were speaking of transformed into a demonic god? As the horrifying notion settled, Requiem's power began to flare as he revealed he had a method that might be able to handle him. Upon hearing this, the god of the true Holy Spirit's composure shattered, and he let out an instantaneous, thunderous shout. He furiously demanded to know what this method of dealing with the omnipotent mage could possibly be, his sudden rage visibly startling the goddess. Both of them now stared intently at Requiem of Souls, who calmly explained that his plan was, for the moment, purely theoretical and unconfirmed. He implored them to let him investigate the matter more deeply before another word was spoken, before any rash actions were taken. The God of the true Holy Spirit regarded the soul Requiem as a cunning and duplicitous entity. He was convinced that this being was secretly plotting something, despite claiming his knowledge was merely theoretical. He suspected the Requiem was already investigating the matter, while the Requiem, conversely, saw the God of the true Holy Spirit as an unhinged fanatic. A zealot who would undoubtedly leap at the chance to pursue the omnipotent mage god, and until all the facts were clear, he had to be restrained. This prompted the goddess to inquire about the omnipotent mage god. Her curiosity piqued. She wondered if they intended to simply ignore his existence. But the Requiem assured her there was no cause for alarm. Regardless of the mage god's immense power, he stood alone, and the faith he could draw from the lower worlds was profoundly limited. It was nowhere near enough to sustain a conflict against the pantheon, and without the sanction of other deities, his world would be forever trapped. That realm, known as the Blue Star, could never ascend to become a higher world. This, he added, was a safeguard woven into the very laws of the universe. It was a cosmic principle designed to prevent a single god from monopolizing a world and amassing a disproportionate level of power. In other words, the omnipotent mage god's secluded sanctuary would ultimately become a cage of his own design. Simultaneously, down in the lower realm of Earth, our protagonist was calmly petting the demonic being. Julian and his master were on their knees, overcome with a desperate need to know the identity of the man before them. After all, the monster that had so easily overpowered them was now acting with complete subservience toward him. The hero turned and addressed Evan, asking if the one-eyed man's identity had been verified. Evan confirmed that it had. He explained that roughly 1 month ago, this person had manifested inside a secret domain within Livia. Intrigued, our protagonist asked if Livia was the small nation in Eastern Europe, a fact Evan promptly confirmed. He continued, stating that the Livian authorities had welcomed the one-eyed man as a figure of national-level strength. They established an adventurers' alliance under his banner and began forcing other nations into their coalition. However, when they attempted to absorb their country, the officials were met with a firm rejection, which Evan presumed was the cause of the current conflict. His objective was a raw demonstration of power for all to witness. In response, Protagonist lowered his head. Alden, sensing the shift, quickly asked if something was wrong, but Kalen intervened, insisting that Protagonist needed to hear this. He explained that, although the one-eyed man professed to be a follower of the House of Lost Souls, the deity he was invoking during the ritual was, in fact, Protagonist himself, the omnipotent mage god. A shadow of disappointment crossed Silas's face. He immediately confronted Jackson's master, accusing him of deception. He demanded to know who, precisely, he had been planning to summon. Jackson's master was utterly terrified. Words failed him as he tried to explain, and in a surge of desperation, he began slamming his head repeatedly into the ground. He cried out that he had been wrong, confessing that he was attempting to summon a malevolent god. Alden shot him a sinister look, his voice low. "You fool," he demanded. "Who told you that the omnipotent, mage god is a malevolent one?" Jackson's master grew even more petrified, his apologies becoming a frantic, unending stream. But amidst the terror, a realization dawned. He looked to Alden and asked if they, too, were believers in the omnipotent mage god. He then murmured that such a revelation was to be expected from a being of the omnipotent mage god's stature, after all. "Even the lesser worlds know his divine title," he said, before pausing to apologize and pose a question. How could a realm that believes in the magic of the omnipotent god still be considered a lesser world? Silas commanded him to explain more clearly. The man then introduced himself as Kalen Kobar, revealing that in his world he had joined a nameless organization. He confessed that within this secret society, they did not recognize the omnipotent mage god, only the so-called evil god. However, he emphasized that in his world, this was an absolute taboo, forcing everyone to feign allegiance to other deities. Protagonist interrupted him sharply, demanding to know the name of the organization's leader. He replied that he lacked that information, as no one had ever witnessed the true appearance of their founder. Kalen then turned to his master, soberly suggesting that the leader of that organization might be a former follower of his. However, it could just as easily be a trap laid by someone with malevolent intentions. Feng urges them to hold back, proposing they wait until he can amass more power through the ritual sacrifice. He declares that the next time the gateway to that other world opens, they will venture through to investigate. At this, Julian's master, Kael, can barely contain his excitement. Kael exclaims that he never imagined he would encounter one of them in such a place, while the Proto and Dylan exchange uneasy glances, feeling awkward about his unrestrained enthusiasm. A smirk plays on Hayden Yoon's lips as he comments that Kael is starting to grow on him. Meanwhile, Nolan Feng silently reflects on the situation. He acknowledges that Kael has provided a wealth of invaluable information, and more importantly, with two world hearts now in their possession, they finally possess the means to resurrect Xylia. After some time passes, the Proto travels to the haunting realm of the Song of Death. There, he successfully performs the ritual, bringing Xylia back to life. Awad. She looks at Nolan Feng with gratitude, confessing that she had waited, with unwavering hope all this time, just to see him again. At that moment, Hayden Yoon steps forward, playfully asking if she missed him as well. Xylia's expression instantly sours with fury. She snaps that he is the very last person she ever wanted to see and demands he depart from her realm at once, prompting a hearty laugh from the Proto. The Proto remarks that the two of them seem to share a rather close relationship, to which Xylia vehemently screams, "No," before explaining that Hayden Yoon was a constant source of chaos, always disorganizing the books she meticulously arranged and never returning them to their proper shelves after reading. Worse, he had a habit of borrowing books and never bringing them back, which is precisely why he was permanently banned from her library. Hayden Yoon sheepishly admits that he remembers her decree, but insists they can't just leave the Proto standing around. He casually suggests they all head to the library. As he confidently offers to lead the way, the Proto watches in amusement as Xylia suddenly lunges forward. She lands a solid kick squarely on the ice demon's back, a clear and painful statement that he does not, under any circumstances, make decisions for her. Upon arriving at Xylia's magnificent library, Hayden Yoon awkwardly chides his friend, reminding her that this is no way to treat an honored guest. She firmly clarifies that no food or drink is ever permitted within the library's walls, then asks the Proto to forgive her apparent rudeness. She pointedly notes, however, that the rule applies to everyone, including Hayden. Nolan Feng laughs warmly, asking the ice demon to please stop provoking Xylia. Turning her attention, she asks her master if he grasps the gravity of their current situation. He confirms he does, and as he recounts their story, she listens with wide-eyed wonder. However, her awe gives way to concern, as she astutely comments that relying solely on the strength of their world to fight against the other gods will be an extraordinarily difficult, if not impossible, task. She explains that without divine intervention, the adventurers of this world can never truly break past their inherent limits or become genuine powerhouses. As evidence, she points out how the Lord witnessed Kabo, the one-eyed man, single-handedly suppressing an entire continent with his overwhelming might. That kind of chasm between world tiers cannot be bridged with mere numbers, especially when facing higher-ranked realms. Moreover, any time the Lord intervenes, he inevitably captures the attention of other gods. Upon hearing this, Caden poses a question. He asks if this essentially means they are quarantined, others cannot get in, and they cannot get out. Selena confirms his assessment. The most pressing issue, she says, is the problem this creates if other deities secretly dispatch agents to infiltrate and wreak havoc. They might fail to detect such incursions in time. The Lord silently contemplates that if other gods are willing to sacrifice their own believers and deploy fanatical squads, much like the incident that caused so many problems when he rescued Selena, it would be a grave threat. He muses that these gods treat their followers as nothing more than disposable pawns, making such a cold-blooded strategy entirely possible. Just then, Aaron addresses his master, revealing a theory he's been pondering. He explains something he had noticed earlier. The exclusive achievements that the Divine Lord can bestow do not seem to be limited solely to his own domains. Instead, they intrude upon the domains of other gods. To be precise, they involve two specific deities. He names the agility-based Shadow Commander and the support-oriented Sage. Hearing these titles, Selena offers a sharp comment. She states that both of them were personally eliminated by the Lord himself during the Great War of the Gods. The Lord seems momentarily puzzled, but Aaron suggests that his master had likely already considered this possibility. Selena grows nervous. Anxiously, she asks what the two of them are discussing. Aaron clarifies that this is a conclusion he only recently reached himself. He proposes that the very divinity of the Shadow Commander and the sacred power of the Sage's prayer might have actually merged with the Lord's own divine essence. Growing more excited, he insists that if this theory is correct, several unexplained events would suddenly make sense, such as how the Lord was struck directly by a potent curse and still made a full recovery. It would also explain how his master possesses the ability to grant exclusive achievements that originate from those two fallen gods, but not from the others. leading him to a chilling realization: they might not have just one god on their side, but potentially three. Then, his mind snaps to the demonic god, Xylia, and he corrects himself grimly. No, that makes four gods. Feng speculates on the grim implication. In other words, if they could defeat other gods, there might be a chance to fuse with their divinity too. Hayden is quick to ground his master, making it clear that this revolutionary theory still needs to be rigorously verified. Hearing this, the prodigy's expression hardens. He understands the stakes and orders him to begin verification at once. Simultaneously, in the celestial realm of the gods, the god of the true essence of the Holy Spirit stirs. He is not alone. The Requiem of Souls and the goddess of the eternal star of tomorrow also feel the shift. Every one of them senses something profoundly wrong, and an immediate, unspoken question hangs in the air. What is happening? A terrifying threat has suddenly emerged, forcing their minds back to a fateful confrontation with the omnipotent mage god. In that memory, the god of the true essence of the Holy Spirit's voice echoes, shouting that they had not come seeking a battle with him. He had questioned why the mage god refused to listen, but the omnipotent being simply remained silent, unmoved. The goddess had once remarked on his aversion to conflict, noting it was the very reason they never forced his hand. But what he was doing now was a clear act of defiance against all of divinity. The Requiem of Souls had urged him to cease his actions. They warned him against such reckless behavior, reminding him that as one of the 11 prime gods, they held immense authority. A threat was issued: they would demote him to the status of a demonic god. At that moment, the omnipotent mage god took a deep, resonating breath. He then unleashed his terrifying power, making it terrifyingly clear that if they judged him as a demonic god, then from that moment on, a demonic god is precisely what he would become. Back in the library, Xylia murmurs that if Hayden's theory holds true, perhaps the prodigy could ascend to become the final god, ruling the entire universe and, in doing so, restore the natural cosmic order. The ice demon points out to his master that the system operating within him might be a manifestation of some greater universal law. It would explain why he is reminded of tasks during the most critical moments. Hearing this, Feng becomes serious and says that, speaking of universal laws, a sudden realization struck him. Upon completing the harrowing mission for his fourth transformation, he had unlocked a profound new ability. With it, he could now manifest a divine realm, a god's exclusive, personal sanctuary. Within this domain, all of existence would bend to his will, serving as both an infinite wellspring of power and an impenetrable fortress. Sita's eyes lit up with an almost forgotten hope, her voice trembling with excitement as she declared she would finally witness a divine realm once more. She painted a vivid picture of a breathtaking paradise called the Endless Sea of Consciousness, a place of serene, azure waters. She spoke of sprawling golden beaches and majestic towers that were monuments to divine authority, a sacred site that, as followers, they were once privileged enough to glimpse. A faint smile touched Feng's lips as he confessed her words had ignited his own anticipation. He then reflected on the fact that since obtaining this incredible power, the very method for creating such a realm had been mystically imprinted upon his mind. He knew instinctively that by merely focusing his consciousness, he could bring it into existence. Concentrating his will, a blinding flash of light erupted. When the light subsided, the sight of the newly forged realm left everyone utterly speechless, their minds struggling to comprehend what they were seeing. However, this was no paradise. It was a stark contrast to Sita's description, an orderly but terrifyingly bleak landscape. A horrified shout tore from Feng's throat. He demanded to know what kind of twisted mockery of a realm he had just created, for it bore no resemblance to the domain of a god. "Where is the sea? Where are the beaches?" he cried out, wondering if his own level was simply too insufficient, too weak. This desolate place before him was so barren, he thought, that not even a wild animal would dare call it home. In that moment of despair, a voice cut through the silence. Someone remarked that they could sense his divine realm. Feng's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto the figure of Ye Jin. Gesturing to the bleak surroundings, the demonic god confirmed Feng's deepest fears. Yes, this was, without a doubt, his own former realm. He mused what a pity it was that this place had been left completely abandoned, starved of divine power for so long. But what he truly wanted to know, he pressed, was how Feng had managed to find it. Feng could only explain his own confusion. He was creating his own divine realm, but had somehow manifested Ye Jin's instead. As he walked, a chilling thought surfaced, a question he couldn't answer. Why had he lost his memory? For the moment, however, he understood the need to uncover this mystery piece by piece, concluding it was best to first survey the colossal tower before him. He noted that the temple was in a state of utter ruin, appearing as if it had been abandoned for centuries, and as he drew closer, a strange feeling intensified. A faint resonance pulsed within him, but he couldn't tell if it stemmed from Xidian's lingering presence, or perhaps from the fact that he had merged with a part of Xidian's divinity. He added that the surrounding mountains and thick clouds completely obscured his vision. This meant he couldn't see what lay ahead, but then a flicker of movement startled him, and he urgently called out to Hanyu and Sasita. He asked if they had witnessed what he had. The ice demon confirmed his sighting, noting that something seemed to be lurking within the clouds. Without a shred of hesitation, Adrian leaped into the air, plunging headlong into the swirling mists to discover what it was. Sasita and Hanyue followed him, their voices filled with concern as they shouted for him to be careful, for the tower ahead was the key. That very tower, the one representing his divine authority, seemed to be just within reach. She then wondered aloud why her master's tower would be located here. He instructed them to survey their surroundings first. As he channeled his power, the system informed him that the construction rules of this realm were incomplete and could not be activated. Adrian pondered if this meant he had not yet fully grasped the governing laws of this domain, but Hanyue's voice cut through his thoughts, calling him over to look quickly as another tower, and then a third, materialized from the dense fog. Sasita remarked that the two towers had clearly been hidden within the clouds, and she recognized their designs from some ancient paintings. They bore a striking resemblance to the fabled towers of the Shadow Commander and the Sage of Prayer. She then exclaimed that Hanyue's theory might be correct after all. Hanyue responded with a proud declaration that this was simply a matter of wisdom. However, our protagonist noted that, according to the system, all of these structures possessed incomplete construction rules. It seemed he could only activate Xidian's realm for now. Not wasting another moment, he strode directly to the demonic god's tower. Placing his hand upon the cold stone, he began to release his power, and a brilliant light ignited from the tower's highest point. A strange energy began to swirl around it, building in intensity until a massive explosion of light erupted from the summit. The system then informed him that he had acquired the authority to enhance the realm, and that he could now wield the power of darkness to strengthen it. Feng is stunned to his core. The demise of any intruder will now serve to amplify his divine authority. He questions if the power thrumming within him truly originates from a demonic god, for it grows stronger with every foe he vanquishes. It suddenly made a terrifying kind of sense why secret realms so aggressively invaded other worlds. This was his first true contact with such a principle. With a god's fundamental ability, he knew he would need to dedicate time to carefully unravel its mysteries. Meanwhile, within the bleak expanse of the realm of lost souls, its master, the god known as Requiem, was deep in thought. He mused that the omnipotent mage god's reappearance was certainly unexpected, but having his enemy finally step out from the shadows was a welcome development. It was far better than allowing him to continue plotting in obscurity. Requiem then focused his senses, observing the mage god's distant tower with immense scrutiny. He contemplated how his adversary had successfully accessed and comprehended the divine rules that were, by right, his own. Requiem knew this act had not only granted the mage god a tremendous boost in power, but had also revealed a startling truth to the cosmos. It confirmed, for the first time, that a god's foundational laws could indeed be transferred, a deeply unfortunate discovery. He was not the only one to realize this, and the knowledge had already planted seeds of mutual suspicion throughout the divine pantheon. Fearing that others from their own domains might seize their authority, the 10 prime gods had fractured into factions of various sizes. Uniting them all against the omnipotent mage god at this juncture would likely prove to be an insurmountable challenge. But luckily, he had a trump card. He had mastered a novel power source derived from divine fusion. He believed that the very essence of the evil god might be the crucial element needed to break the present stalemate. His gaze then fell upon the intelligence the system provided, confirming that the omnipotent mage god had practically forfeited his own realm. He was now a fugitive, hiding in the lower worlds, presuming the restrictions of universal laws would protect him. He believes no one can touch him there, Requiem declared, his own power surging forth. I shall put that theory to the test. Later, at the training facility, Feng let out a deep, weary yawn. As he'd anticipated, the strain was immense. Understanding the true nature of a god's power was not a task to be completed in a short period. At that moment, Duan arrived, calling out his name. Nina Feng asks if the exchange has been fully settled, and he confirms that it has. The proto remarks that Kabo is exceptionally arrogant and conceited, noting that he genuinely seems to see himself as a true follower of the evil god. He therefore instructs Dwayne to keep a close watch on him, lest he cause even more problems. Dwayne agrees, but confesses that Kabo seems somewhat different from what he had first imagined. He then adds that he never expected someone from the fighter class to become a believer in the Lord God. He admits that if he hadn't witnessed it with his own eyes, he would never have believed it. leaving Dwayne feeling slightly awkward. Dwayne asks why Cabo suddenly seems like a completely different person, prompting a smile from the one-eyed man. He apologizes to Dwayne for his previous arrogance, explaining that when he first arrived in this world, many malicious people tried to take advantage of him, so he had to project an air of superiority to avoid countless issues. Dwayne recalls asking the Proto to investigate Cabo's background, and apparently, he truly hadn't done anything outrageous since coming to this world. However, still wary, Dwayne's expression turns serious as he asks Cabo if his actions won't tarnish the image of the omnipotent god of magic. Cabo, looking embarrassed, quickly tells Dwayne not to worry. He explains that everyone already believes he follows the house of the soul god, and that he will clarify everything when the time is right. He claims that he was inspired by the Proto to abandon darkness for light, turning over a completely new leaf. He promises that he will cause absolutely no problems for his master. Upon hearing this, Dwayne is left completely stunned. He thinks to himself that this man changes his personality far too easily. After relaying all of this to the Proto, he concludes that Cabo isn't as foolish as they first thought, and if that is the case, they can afford to observe him a bit longer to determine if he is truly trustworthy. Then, Feng comments that as for his true identity, there is still no need to reveal it. Dwayne then informs the Proto that Cabo and Zheng Wei have specially prepared an apology banquet and sincerely hope the Proto will grace them with his presence. Aiden Thorne cracks a knowing smile, revealing that the prestigious Sterling Trading House has also been invited to join the occasion. He muses aloud that they should certainly attend, seeing it as the perfect opportunity to finally get some well-deserved rest. Upon their arrival at the opulent Crestwood family estate, they are warmly greeted by representatives from the Sterling House, and a lively conversation ensues among them. Passers-by gaze in awe, whispering that something monumental must be unfolding, as rumors of a meeting between the two great auction houses had spread like wildfire. Just then, a sleek limousine glides to a halt. Inside, Kane gently strokes his shadow beast, Nyx, while making a wry observation. He remarks with a touch of sarcasm that he was unaware a luxury vehicle was required for this trip, and from that fact alone, he deduces their destination must be a place of considerable extravagance. As Aiden Thorne and Damien step out, their presence commands attention. Kyle rushes forward to greet them, expressing his profound relief that they have arrived without incident. Two young hostesses, waiting to receive the guests, watch in stunned silence, finding it hard to believe these newcomers are the esteemed VIPs from the major auction houses. Their youthful appearance is disarming, until a flash of recognition crosses the blonde hostess's face, her eyes widening in sudden realization. She turns to Kane, her voice filled with admiration, proclaiming him to be the legendary hero who vanquished the hidden boss and saved countless lives. She explains that her own family was trapped within that secret realm, which is why the video of his heroic deeds left such an indelible mark on her. Her red-haired companion is equally starstruck, echoing the sentiment that Kane is truly a magnificent hero. She admits to having seen the famous video as well, and shyly asks if he might honor them with an autograph. Kale, overhearing this exchange, turns his fury upon Jasper, seething that he would dare to provoke such a figure. He laments that Jasper's recklessness has nearly brought ruin upon them all. A scarred retainer then gestures for Kane and his party to proceed inside. Once everyone has entered and taken their seats at the grand banquet, the atmosphere lightens as they begin to converse and unwind. The blonde hostess offers a bowl of ice cream to Nyx, the shadow beast, her face lighting up with joy as the creature eagerly laps it up. Suddenly, Jasper rises to his feet, commanding the room's attention, and declares that the unfortunate misunderstanding that transpired was entirely his fault. Kale then stands as well, solemnly stating that as Jasper's master, he failed in his teachings, and therefore shares the burden of responsibility. Kyle Easton felt a surge of satisfaction, thinking it was truly incredible that Jaden was finally offering an apology. He mused that he was still reaping the benefits of assistant instructor Nathan Feng's considerable influence. Mr. Zhang then addressed the protagonist, announcing that to express their deepest apologies, they, the Clearwater Auction House, were prepared to gift him 25% of their shares, along with 3 mines that yielded transformation stones. Mr. Aaron Cheng immediately followed, stating that to convey their own gratitude, the Cheng Trade Exchange was also willing to grant him 25% of its shares, complemented by another 3 transformation stone mines. The young women in the crowd were stunned, murmuring that 1/4 of the shares from 2 Titan corporations was an unbelievable fortune. They whispered that even if he did nothing for the rest of his life, it was more than enough wealth to sustain his family for generations. Mr. Aaron Cheng corrected them, making it clear they didn't understand the full picture. Ever since we began our association with him, he explained, our company has never once lacked high-quality products, and our revenue has multiplied several times over. He then emphasized that the 25% stake was insignificant, because the most crucial element was ensuring the protagonist was willing to continue working with them. Internally, Nathan considered the shares a trivial matter. He knew the mines were the real prize, especially having just completed his 4th transformation mission. The quantity of transformation stones he would require going forward was set to increase dramatically, and now, with his own mines, they would no longer have to make constant, temporary purchases. Caleb then called out to him. Furthermore, he began, there is another matter on which we would greatly appreciate your opinion. A hint of worry flashed in the one-eyed man's expression. He remembered how, just the day before, he had commissioned the Clearwater Trading House to gather all available information on Nathan Feng. The findings revealed a man who was nothing short of extraordinary, and he had seen how Dean displayed an immense level of respect for him. He began to wonder if the protagonist was, in fact, the omnipotent god of magic this world spoke of in legends. On top of everything, he thought, there was the demon Momo, a being of immense power that served as his personal pet. Liam turns, his intense gaze locking onto Cabo, who flinches in fear as he realizes the formidable man has noticed his scrutiny. Despite this, Liam approaches, keen to hear what Cabo has to say. With some unease, Cabo explains that in Livia, he had a proposition. He had pleaded with neighboring nations to form a united front against the relentless invasion of magical creatures. It was a tragedy, he lamented, that there were so few truly powerful adventurers, leaving their defensive forces critically undermanned. Liam quickly deduced that Cabo had established something akin to a mutual aid alliance. This organization garnered support from several countries, who then entrusted Cabo's forces with resolving their most perilous secret realms. Among these missions were dungeons with extraordinary rewards, which is precisely how Cabo managed to acquire the 2 fragments of the world heart. A hopeful smile touches his lips as he tells Liam that, if possible, they wish to forge a cooperative partnership with him. Their shared goal would be to safeguard the security of their world, the Blue Star. Liam internally mused that Cabo held a significant status in Eastern Europe. With his reputation steadily growing internationally, Liam recognized the strategic value of leveraging Cabo's influence to rally more support for their cause. With this strategic advantage in mind, Liam gives Cabo a firm nod, accepting the proposal without hesitation. Overjoyed, Cabo thanks him profusely, stating it's an honor to have a powerhouse of Liam's caliber join their efforts. However, Liam was already thinking ahead, realizing that if the battlefield expanded, they would need more elite warriors to protect their homeland. It was clear to him that the time had come to initiate a grueling, hellish training regimen for the next generation of adventurers. Later, as the banquet continued, Liam asked Cabo to recount the full details of his harrowing experience. Cabo explained that he was originally charting a secret realm when he was suddenly and violently swept into a pocket of temporal turbulence. He added that such phenomena are exceptionally rare, believed to occur only once in 100 years. To this day, he has no idea how he stumbled into it, and he admits that even speaking of it now fills him with a lingering dread. Within that chaotic rift, he explained, the very fabric of time and space was dangerously unstable. To have emerged alive and completely unscathed was nothing short of a divine blessing. Somewhere within the realm of the Blue Star, onlookers gaze in astonishment, questioning the spectacle unfolding before their eyes. It appeared to be a dimensional rift, perhaps even a timeless vortex. Meanwhile, back at the training center, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The most prominent guild leaders and Professor Xavier Yan had all assembled, while Nicholas Feng observed from the control room. He reflected on the guild presidents he had encountered over the short period, concluding they were decent people, and that alongside Professor Yan, they possessed the greatest potential for development. While enduring the hellish training, President Victor Ying understood that this was a special regimen, one designed to drastically amplify Nicholas's power, and for that reason, he had to take it with the utmost seriousness. Nicholas grew even more focused, intensifying his dark power over the leaders, as Lucas Ping and Evan Chuan struggled to endure the pressure. Madame Lillian Hua turned to Victor Ying, asking if they were simply going to defend themselves so passively. She remarked that the training they were undergoing was utterly diabolical, and if she didn't trust young Nicholas Feng, she would have already believed he was an evil deity. Victor Ying replied that their numbers gave them an advantage. He suggested they coordinate based on a battle team model, and proposed using the guard formation. Thus, they all assumed the formation, and began to resist the pressure. Nicholas, seeing this, thought they would likely be disappointed. He remembered that his friend Leo and the others had tried that same method, and it had been completely useless. However, he noted that after studying authority in the realm of the gods, he had gained more insight when observing this kind of fighting style. Looking at their guard formation, Nicholas commented that, as expected of experienced adventurers, their coordination was remarkably smooth. Madame Lillian Hua then deployed her Earth Shield skill. At the same time, Jasmine Yan activated her Suffering Purification skill, but soon both became confused, sensing something was terribly wrong. Lucas Ping and President Victor Ying were left speechless, their mouths agape in utter shock at what they were witnessing. The system announced that with the increased suppression, once the scholar and priest were involved, when all classes assemble into a guard formation, their defensive capabilities surge by a full 20%. A flicker of confusion crosses Sienna's face as she demands an explanation, just as Yuna and Luna are enveloped in an aura granting them an 8% boost to their evasion. Their synergy as twin assassins also fortifies their armor by 15%. Adrian, with unwavering resolve, simply asks for their trust as he unleashes the domain's true power. Cecilia watches in awe, her voice barely a whisper as she questions if such power is even real. A wave of exhilaration washes over the team as they manage to hold their ground. Ethan exclaims that the squad formation is a game-changer, acknowledging the sudden surge of strength flowing through them all. But this newfound power came at a price. Moments later, the prodigy's gaze falls upon his teammates. All of them collapsed, drained of every ounce of energy. He realizes the consequence of their efforts. They had pushed their limits, holding out far longer than expected, only to be hit with a backlash more severe than any physical blow. Adrian turns to his master, his voice strained. "That divine intervention? Was that you?" A knowing smile touches the master's lips. He explains that witnessing their flawless cooperation had sparked something within him. Latent ideas began to crystallize in his mind, and in a fleeting moment of clarity, the domains themselves seemed to respond to his will. A system notification then confirmed his breakthrough. His comprehension of the universe's fundamental rules had deepened. He is left to ponder a profound question. Could one truly grasp the laws of the universe through such a vicarious experience? The following day, back within the familiar walls of the training center, old Feng stares in utter disbelief. His surprise quickly melts into roaring laughter as he points at Ethan, declaring how utterly spent he looks. Ethan pleads with old Feng to quell his laughter and show some maturity, his body still racked with tremors from the previous day's hellish ordeal. He desperately asks for support, and his friend immediately rushes over, wrapping an arm around him to keep him steady. Through gritted teeth, Ethan questions if he's only there to gloat. "Of course not," old Feng replies, his tone shifting. He claims he was merely bored, but a sly, sinister glint in his eyes suggests otherwise as he reveals that Nina has summoned everyone. "The reason," he whispers, "is that Ethan has apparently stumbled upon a momentous discovery." Old Feng lets out a triumphant laugh, asking, "Aren't we just incredible?" Ethan shoots back, calling old Feng a narcissist and begging him to slow his pace. He accuses him of deliberately causing him pain. Ignoring the complaint, old Feng proceeds toward the control room, where Nina and Shay are already waiting. Overseeing the operation, Ian immediately questioned the professor about their progress so far. She reported that they had organized several squads to conduct simultaneous experiments. In doing so, they had discovered a number of team domains, each with distinct effects, explaining that, for the time being, the classes capable of activating these domains were primarily those specializing in agility, specific spell types, and support roles. Critically, she noted that the activation of these domains was not tied to a mage's level, but rather to the synergy within the team. Rowan processed this, realizing it meant that even lower-level adventurers could now stand a chance against far more powerful foes. He sought confirmation, asking if that was truly the implication of her findings. Provided they were properly trained, the professor offered a knowing smile, assuring him he was absolutely correct. Meanwhile, Finn found himself adrift. He felt the concepts being discussed were slipping further and further beyond his grasp, as if he had unknowingly reached the very edge of his understanding. Just then, Dwayne burst in, urgently calling out to Ian, the team's protagonist. Ian turned instantly, demanding to know what was wrong, as a frantic Dwayne explained that Kale had sent a priority request, holding out his phone to show a picture. It depicted what appeared to be a dimensional rift, and Finn instinctively took the phone for a closer look. He questioned the urgency, reminding them that Kale was supposed to submit all requests for a formal selection process. Dwayne stressed that this situation was different, that this particular request was exceptionally unique. After studying the image, Ian was stunned, asking what it was he was looking at and wondering aloud if it could be a newly discovered secret realm. In a desperate tone, Dwayne shouted that Kale had identified it as a temporal turbulence. Hannah quietly remarked to her master that it had only been a month since Kale's last encounter with a temporal disturbance. She questioned whether it was even possible for another turbulence to manifest in such a brief period. At that moment, A cold dread washed over the protagonist as he saw something beginning to emerge from the swirling anomaly. Later, gathered at the protagonist's home, Kale began to explain that the location where the temporal turbulence had appeared was critical, is situated in the state of Wilken, Austria, and confirmed that all necessary arrangements were complete. They could use a flight scroll for immediate travel. Feng simply agreed, stating it was settled and he would depart at once. Cabo, taken aback by the hero's swift response, urgently asked if he intended to face this threat alone. Feng affirmed with a simple yes, questioning why that would be a problem. The one-eyed man was visibly startled. He insisted that the temporal turbulence was a genuinely perilous phenomenon and that something truly unimaginable might have emerged from it. He then pleaded with the hero to at least take his immensely powerful companion beast. Feng considered this, believing that against unknown dangers, others might not be of much assistance. Only Hanil Sasita and he would suffice. Upon their arrival in the state of Wilken, they waited outside until a figure approached a striking woman who called out for her master. Cabo informed the hero that the woman was Lilith, another one of his disciples. He added that her father was the regional governor, but their attention was captured by the violent trembling that racked her body as she drew near. She appeared to be caught between overwhelming worry and tears. Cabo rushed to her side, demanding to know what had transpired. A man appeared, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. He drew her into a protective embrace and introduced himself as Andre, Lilith's father. He offered a sincere apology for his daughter's distressed state, promising he would provide a full explanation of the dire situation. He then requested that they all follow him. After leading them to a vast overlook, Andre gestured toward the horizon. From that vantage point, they could witness the precise location of the temporal turbulence, a truly horrifying spectacle to behold. Andre began to explain that the reason he issued the high-level request was because this particular anomaly was beyond anything they had ever comprehended. In an alarmingly short period, it had completely engulfed a small town, warping reality to form a pocket dimension akin to a secret realm. He stressed the most terrifying detail. Every single one of the town's original residents had been transformed into powerful and grotesque monsters. The government had already dispatched elite squads to contain the threat, but tragically, the missions resulted in a great number of sacrifices. Despite their valiant efforts, they had failed to neutralize the secret realm. He then informed them that the last team sent in, the team Lilith had personally formed, was completely annihilated, and only by fighting with every fiber of her being did she alone manage to escape the carnage. She confessed that her survival was entirely thanks to the brutal training she had endured under Mr. Kale. Otherwise, she would have undoubtedly shared her comrade's fate. Taking a shaky breath, Lilith apologized for her outburst. She explained that those team members were her dearest friends, which was why she had lost control of her emotions. Jay looked on, astonished. He had only ever known Lilith for her iron will and formidable personality. It was the first time he had ever seen her so profoundly devastated. Kyle turned to his student, his expression grim. "Are the monsters in that secret realm truly so powerful?" he asked. "Yes," she confirmed, explaining that it was a time-limited domain requiring the completion of 2 separate routes to achieve victory. She described how the 2 paths were perfect mirror images of each other. But crucially, they never connected. This meant that even if one route was cleared, there was insufficient time to reach the other, guaranteeing an ultimate failure. Kale's brow furrowed. In other words, the safest approach is for 2 squads to tackle the routes simultaneously. Precisely, Lilith agreed. But that presents its own problem. She pointed out that such a strategy would require an exceptionally high level of strength from the adventurers, and they were struggling to assemble even 1 qualified squad right now, let alone 2. A small smile touched Ethan's lips. "I have an idea," he said calmly. "I think Kale can lead a team down one path, and I will take the other one alone." The declaration left everyone utterly speechless, unable to believe he truly intended to face the dungeon by himself. Ethan mentally reviewed the plan. Lilith, though beaten, had managed to escape. With Kale's power, even if he encountered overwhelming danger, at the very least, he was certain the veteran warrior could retreat unharmed. As Ethan weighed the odds, Lilith stared at him in disbelief. Her master had promised he would recruit a powerful expert to help them, but looking at the young man before her, she saw nothing more than an ordinary, 1-star novice. He even appeared to be younger than her. No matter how her master vouched for him, relying on a single person for such a task was beyond reckless. Kale watched Ethan, his face etched with worry over his protégé's audacious decision. He presses for a plan, but Feng simply offers a reassuring smile, telling him not to worry. His only instruction is to focus on completing their assigned route. With the strategy set, they immediately venture into the secret realm of temporal turbulence. The moment they step inside, A massive timer materializes, its digits glowing ominously as it begins a 2-hour countdown. Leon declares that their time limit is fixed. They are now in a race against the clock. He announces he will take the left path, instructing Kale's group to head right, which prompts a wave of concern from Lilith. She turns to her master, questioning if the young Leon Feng will truly be all right. Uncertain, he admits that he honestly doesn't know. He confesses he has never witnessed any of Leon's abilities firsthand. However, he clarifies that as long as the demon Nian, his pet, is by his side, he believes there shouldn't be a problem, revealing he personally saw the creature consume his entire legion of shadow guards. Lilith is utterly stunned by this revelation, struggling to believe it, as she is well aware of her master's formidable shadows. These guards possess immense power, capable of overwhelming any powerhouse in their world. A chill runs down her spine, as she wonders what kind of horrifying creature could devour such an elite force. Her thoughts then shift to the person himself. What kind of individual could possibly tame such a monster and keep it as a pet? Still deeply unsettled, Lilith speculates that perhaps Leon Feng chose to act alone for a specific reason. Perhaps he is concealing a secret he doesn't want them to discover, a thought that lingers as they forge ahead through the treacherous realm. Kale's team is soon ambushed by strange creatures, and their numbers quickly begin to swell. The horde charges directly at them, forcing Kale to unleash his soul-devouring serpents. The attack eradicates several monsters in a single, devastating strike. Jackson, filled with admiration, exclaims that such skill is only to be expected from his master. He then finds himself pondering if these creatures are the very same humans who were transformed. He concludes that they are undeniably more powerful than the typical monsters found in other secret realms. Nevertheless, he remains confident in his ability to handle them, also remembering that Leon's strength far surpasses his own. Just then, a glance at the timer reveals only 1 hour remaining. The battlefield pulsed with chaotic energy. Cabo relentlessly unleashed his power, only to find the monsters were inexplicably growing stronger with each passing moment. His abilities, once potent, were now failing. A cold dread crept into his heart as he struggled to understand why they were no longer effective. He realized with horror that using the same powers repeatedly was only hardening the creatures, rendering his attacks completely futile. The chilling possibility began to form in his mind. Could there be a shared consciousness, a hive mind connecting these abominations? This would explain their terrifyingly rapid evolution. Just then, a creature broke from the horde, charging directly at Cabo as Ji Cheng cried out a warning. In a flash, Ji Cheng channeled raw energy into his palm, striking the beast and saving his master from certain doom. The monster was thrown far into the distance, but Cabo somberly acknowledged that they were forced to use their abilities to fight back. He was gripped by the terrible fear that at this rate, they were merely catalysts, accelerating the monster's path to invincibility. His concern deepened as the crushing silence of the realm reminded him that all forms of communication were utterly useless here. Unable to contact the Prada, he could only wonder with a heavy heart if Ningfeng was managing to hold his own, all alone. Meanwhile, Ningfeng stood with an almost serene focus as a monster rushed towards him, its ferocity barely registering. With a single, effortless sweep of his arm, he cleaved the creature in two, its parts flying in a grim spray across the landscape. He resumed his steady advance through the distorted realm, while behind him, the remains of the monster began to react with an unnatural light. A silent, collective thought registered among the creatures. The Prota's power was too immense, their evolutionary speed couldn't possibly keep pace. It was a bitter realization that they couldn't stop his relentless advance, but there was a cold comfort in their other, ongoing success. The alternate route, they knew, was still firmly under their control. A spectral timer showed the remaining mission time, 1 hour and 26 minutes, and 31 seconds. As Cabo's group fought desperately against the tide, Lilith suddenly turned and asked her master if he was all right. He insisted he was fine, though admittedly weary, claiming he could still endure for a while longer. Yet, in that brief moment, his lone eye caught a blur of motion from his blind spot. It was far too late, the blow landed with crushing force. Seizing a momentary lapse in his guard, Lilith struck from the shadows, her attack a silent, unseen betrayal. The blade pierced through him as she mockingly asked for his thoughts. Cabo could only gasp in agony while Jason screamed in horror. He demanded to know the meaning of her actions, but Lilith simply offered a sinister smile, whispering a hollow apology. She explained they had stumbled upon a power far too great, and their elimination was now a necessity. Cabo, against all odds, remained standing. He questioned if this treacherous woman was truly her, and Lilith calmly confirmed that she was indeed the same person they had always known. However, she had discovered a path to greater strength, a path that required them to become her sacrifices. Fury ignited within Jason as he began channeling his power, screaming for his master to flee with every ounce of speed he possessed. He then unleashed his shadow guards upon Lilith, but she contemptuously swatted them from existence with a single, effortless strike. A cruel laugh escaped her lips as she branded them fools, declaring that from the very moment they had entered this place, their fate was sealed, and they would never leave again. It dawned on Cabo that her story of being the sole survivor had been a calculated deception from the start, and they had walked willingly into her meticulously crafted trap. She had never possessed any intention of letting them escape. Lilith savored the look of pure panic on her master's face. It was the very same expression she herself had worn not long ago, but she knew, with chilling certainty, that she was far more cunning than he. Her mind drifted back to when she wore that face, standing helpless before monstrous creatures, completely overcome with desperation. She remembered screaming, pleading with their master to wait, professing that she finally understood the true nature of his power. She begged for her humble life to be spared, promising that in return, if his wish was to conquer the world, she would willingly become his most loyal and devoted servant. At the time, her partner had cried out in utter outrage. He had demanded to know the meaning of her words, desperately reminding her that Clark and their other comrades had sacrificed everything to give her a fleeting chance to escape. Yet, he barely uttered those words before being brutally silenced. Lilith's expression was deathly serious as she commanded him to be quiet, leaving the other adventurers stunned and paralyzed by the betrayal. Suddenly, a divine voice resonated, declaring them too feeble and unworthy of its allegiance. It proclaimed a preference for using them as sacrifices, and immediately, shadowy tendrils began seizing all the adventurers. As they were being consumed, Lilith watched with exhilaration, proclaiming that the divine being was right to claim them. She then made a chilling proposition. If the deity would grant her power, she would offer it far greater sacrifices in return. For a brief moment, the entity seemed intrigued by her audacious offer. However, it soon thundered that humans were a humble yet disgusting race, a contradiction it found strangely fascinating. The being then challenged Lilith, stating its desire to witness the quality of offerings she could provide. She thanked it profusely, promising that it would not be disappointed in her devotion. After a moment's thought, a sinister expression crossed her face as she declared she had no more time to waste on them. They would serve as her first offerings. Jashun and his master could only watch in horror, bracing for what was to come. Yet, in that very instant, the system announced that the left route had been successfully completed. Elation washed over them as they began to celebrate, but Lilith commanded them to wipe the smiles from their faces. She sneered that their joy was pointless, as the two routes existed in separate space-times. Even if the hero cleared one, the other was impossible. But then, a second message echoed through the hall, announcing the right route had also been completed. Lilith was stunned into disbelief, screaming in desperation, demanding to know how he could have possibly accomplished it. Meanwhile, Feng stood before the colossal monster he had just slain, calmly observing that Lilith's theory had been correct. The two paths were perfect mirror images, and all he needed was his voidwalk ability. He had simply crossed between the two dimensions, clearing both routes simultaneously without ever retracing his steps. But as he finished his assessment, he sensed a strange distortion, wondering if he was being teleported. His suspicion was confirmed as the world warped around him, while Lilith remained trapped in her chamber, desperate to understand how the hero had won. They follow both paths until a deep unease settles over them. Lilith, Jason, and Kale all begin to sense that something is profoundly wrong. Suddenly, reality warps, and they are violently yanked into an unknown dimension. Disoriented and terrified, Jason begins to panic. He frantically demands to know where he is, but Lilith understands that anyone who completes both routes is brought to this place, though it is her first time witnessing it herself. Her composure shatters in an instant. Looming before them is a creature of colossal scale, so immense it defies comprehension. A trembling Jason asks his master if this monstrous being is the final guardian of the hidden realm. He notes that judging by its terrifying aura alone, it must be at least a demon lord-class monster. His mind races, concluding it might be the most powerful being below a demon god. The horrifying realization dawns on him. They are all going to die here. Just then, Lilith starts to laugh, declaring that her master's true form is truly awe-inspiring. Seeing that the prodigy is nowhere in sight, she gleefully assumes he has already been eliminated from existence. Her laughter intensifies, bordering on maniacal. She addresses the great beast, announcing that she, his humble servant, has arrived, and that the people with her are the sacrifices she has brought to appease him, hoping he is satisfied. However, the deity questions her words, its confusion throwing Lilith into a state of bewilderment. She falters, realizing the voice of her supposed master sounds completely different from the one she first heard. In that moment of uncertainty, a figure appears, walking calmly atop the great deity's head. It is Nolan, radiating a terrifying pressure and a soul-crushing gaze. He coolly demands a thorough explanation from Lilith. Beside her, Jason and Kale are left utterly speechless. They are stunned to see the prodigy alive, but Lilith is apoplectic, wanting to know why in the world Nolan is standing on her master's head, and more importantly, why the great being isn't even resisting. Beneath Nolan's feet, the colossal deity is drenched in a cold sweat of pure terror. Its mind is consumed by fear as it begins to recall the events of a few moments earlier. It had acknowledged the prodigy's high attack power, but never imagined he could actually survive to the end of both routes. It certainly never expected him to defeat its personally assigned guardians with a single, devastating forbidden spell. Then, Nolan had unleashed another forbidden incantation, a spell so profound it casually ignored the separation of space. This second spell had completely disregarded the very laws of time, bringing him directly to this sanctum. Appearing on an alternate route, the entity's shadowy power extinguished the guards before they could even react. The chilling conclusion began to dawn on them. To witness 3 forbidden spells cast with such casual mastery could only mean they stood in the presence of the demon god himself. In that moment, Jace's voice roared at Lilith. "Your plot has failed. But why? Why betray our master and deceive us all?" Her expression twisted into a contemptuous sneer as she replied, "Because all of you are fools." She then cried out, her voice a fanatical plea to her master, declaring that with his divine power, he could effortlessly claim the world, with her family and her as his most devoted pillars of support. As she spoke, Prada recalled Cabo's earlier words, and everything clicked into place. It was no wonder he had spoken with such certainty. Still, a desperate Lilith shrieked, "Does the feeling of absolute superiority not please you, my master? The strong ruling the weak is the natural law of this world." Cabo's voice cut through her rant, cold and final. "The god you worship despises the greedy and the foolish. Unfortunately for you, your family embodies both." The words struck Lilith like a physical blow, leaving her utterly stunned. Sasita, deeply impressed by Cabo's declaration, remarked how perfectly his words echoed the Lord God's own sentiments. Hanyen simply noted that Cabo possessed a truly profound understanding of Prada, even as Lilith spiraled further into despair. She begged her master one last time to act, to eliminate everyone before him. At her plea, a colossal hand began to move with terrifying force. Sheer terror finally washed over Lilith's face as the deity, without a flicker of mercy, simply crushed the life from her. Meanwhile, Ning Feng announced that time was nearly up. He would finish off the Secret Realm's boss and call it a day. He vaulted forward, unleashing his ability, and, as always, dispatched the creature with a single, effortless blow. But his routine was broken by a surprise, an unexpected drop. A system prompt announced he had acquired the emblem of the Relic of the End. It then asked if he wished to commence absorption, just as the entire secret realm began to convulse with violent energy fluctuations. Alara observed that temporal turbulence is inherently unstable, a fleeting anomaly that should typically vanish on its own. However, this particular tear in time stubbornly persisted, a fact that deeply troubled her. Kale turned, his brow furrowed, demanding to know what made this situation so dire. The ice demon's voice was grave. "Not even the power of a god can erase temporal turbulence," she explained. "They can only hope to. Rely on the faith of countless high-ranking believers to contain it temporarily." But Serafina interjected, pointing out that the very existence of the turbulence was a constant threat. She warned that it was a ticking time bomb, a hidden danger that a powerful entity could use to shatter the seal at any given moment. She then reminded them that entire worlds had been annihilated in precisely this manner. A dark suspicion began to form in Kale's mind. He considered the chilling possibility that something this devastating was not an accident, but a weapon crafted by other gods specifically to eliminate him. His expression hardened. "If that's the case," he vowed, his voice cold as steel, "they will pay." But as the words left his lips, a sudden surge from the anomaly caught him completely off guard. As Kale struggled to assert his will over the chaotic energies, Alara rushed to his side, her face etched with concern, asking if he was all right. He gritted his teeth, his focus wavering. "It seems," he strained to say, "that to repair this breach, I'm going to need something more." In that very instant, a system mission materialized before him. The objective was stark: repair the world. The time limit was a mere 2 hours. The penalty for failure was chillingly simple: the host's complete elimination. The irony was not lost on Kale. Even a god's power was useless against this foe. A god could not erase temporal turbulence, and yet the system had just commanded him to do exactly that. He was forced to question the system's nature. Was it an existence that stood even above the gods, casually threatening him with oblivion for failing tasks that deities themselves deemed impossible? Showing little regard for the so-called omnipotent god of magic, Jareth turned to his master with a troubled expression. "Should we intervene?" he asked. Master Valerius held up a calming hand. "Kale appears to be contemplating a solution. Therefore, we must not disturb him for now." Meanwhile, Kale poured every ounce of his being into the effort to restore the temporal turbulence. But suddenly, something went terribly wrong, an unseen force lashing out and striking him with brutal force. A raw scream of agony was ripped from his throat. As he fought to endure the blinding torment, he realized with abject horror that the temporal energies were tearing his very body apart from the inside. The excruciating pain was unimaginable, a vortex of suffering that threatened to shatter his consciousness until a strange, disembodied voice echoed through the chaos of his mind. At that very moment, a flood of system notifications appeared, proclaiming a chilling prophecy: the gods would fall. A cold dread gripped him. His mind reeled, questioning if this was an elaborate trap, but he quickly decided that whether it was a trap or not was irrelevant. He held on to the belief that if the system presented a challenge, a solution had to exist. So, he gritted his teeth against the searing pain. Forcing himself into a state of calm, he soon detected something, a faint sensation that was almost nothing at all. Though it was gone in an instant, he was certain that a different kind of rupture point had just manifested deep within the chaos. He began to concentrate with greater intensity, but the task was proving immensely difficult. A temporal turbulence seemed to be working against him. The interference felt deliberate, a conscious force pushing back, which only strengthened his resolve to focus harder. It didn't take long for an idea to spark in his mind. Meanwhile, just outside the secret realm, a patient figure was waiting. This figure was Governor Andre, Liu's father, who noted that over 2 hours had passed since they had ventured into the hidden space. A cold smile touched his lips. It seemed his daughter's desperate gambit had paid off after all. With a sinister grin, he thought to himself, hoping that the demon lord residing within the secret realm was pleased with the sacrifice his daughter had offered, because as long as he secured the demon lord's allegiance, no one on earth could possibly stand in the way of his conquest of the world. Just then, an adventurer approached and reported to his master. The report was that operatives from the Alliance Guild were on the scene. The governor turned, sneering that the fools were only now reacting. But it mattered little. He would personally escort them to the afterlife. As he plotted, the Alliance Guild was systematically securing the perimeter. Leading the operation was Johnny Wilson, the chief commander of the Austrian Alliance Guild, who was calmly waiting for the governor. Most adventurer guilds in Austria were established independently by large corporations, but the Alliance Guild was a different beast entirely. It was the supreme authority for all Austrian adventurers. One of the men approached the chief commander with a question. He asked if they should breach the area and apprehend Governor Andre, but Johnny simply replied that they should wait a little longer. At that very instant, the faint magical trails of a flight scroll drew near, and Johnny's attention was immediately captured, overjoyed that his old friend had finally made his appearance. Meanwhile, deep within the secret realm, Liam was lost in concentration. He believed he had located the very source of the temporal turbulence, and could now use his divine power to anchor it in place. He understood that once it was secured, that point of chaos would no longer spiral out of control. Then, he began to perceive faint, shimmering spots in other locations, and a surge of excitement coursed through him. He concluded that as long as he replicated this method, the entire breach could be sealed. Nearby, Hannah and Xylia watched in disbelief. They were astonished, whispering to each other that the rift was genuinely closing. Liam took a long, deep breath. He thought to himself that he had finally managed to restore balance, just as a message from the system materialized in his mind. It stated that his comprehension of universal laws had deepened, and the very resilience of the world he guarded had increased. Xylia witnessed this as well, commenting that what she was seeing was entirely beyond the scope of her knowledge. Liam promised to explain later, noting that he would need to study the phenomenon slowly afterward. His expression then grew somber as he recalled the enigmatic voice he had heard while mending the temporal turbulence. He burned to know what it truly meant. At that very moment, Jason pointed excitedly and urged his master to look. The breach was clearly stabilizing, and he exclaimed that the environment itself seemed to be returning to normal. Stuttering in awe, he called it unbelievable. Liam then approached Cabo, who recoiled in terror and began to shout. He begged Liam to believe him, swearing that he, the one-eyed Cabo, never had any intention of conquering their world. Liam simply smiled, and placing a hand on his shoulder, said that he believed him. After exiting the secret realm, Liam turned at the sudden burst of a strange sound, immediately trying to pinpoint its origin. 20 minutes earlier, one of the Alliance Guild adventurers had been left speechless by the ethereal trails of 3 distinct flight scrolls. One of them belonged to none other than the former commander, a legendary figure and friend to the current guild leader. It was Lao Feng, accompanied by William and Zachary. The old man wasted no time, immediately demanding a full report from Johnny about the situation. To Wang Yue, the man standing before him, Johnny Wilson, the chief commander of the Austrian Alliance Guild's Holy Light Knights, was a living legend, much like Mr. Feng himself. He was a figure one typically only saw in news broadcasts. The commander began to explain that their forces were in the midst of an operation to arrest the treacherous Governor Andre, but he emphasized a critical obstacle. They were unable to breach the perimeter of the secret realm. Consequently, they were forced to wait. He expressed profound regret for drawing the adventurers from Lao Feng's homeland into such a dishonorable internal conspiracy. The old man, however, clarified that the Prada was safely inside the secret realm, and because of this, there was no cause for major alarm. Their focus should remain squarely on dealing with the governor. He declared that Andre must pay the ultimate price for his betrayal of Ningfeng. This unwavering resolve left the commander perplexed. He couldn't fathom how they could be so composed, knowing that the unstable secret realm was the most immediate and grave threat in the area. A short distance away, the last cries of battle faded, as several adventurers were viciously slaughtered. A few of the bloodthirsty demons, responsible, commented on their easy victory. They sneered that the insignificant ants they had just exterminated were nothing more than a minor distraction. Their attention then turned to a far greater prize, Chief Commander Johnny Wilson. Aware that the knight was stationed on the mountain, they began to plot, considering a direct assault to finally extinguish his light.